Hello, everyone. I'd like to take you on a ride today, on a ride to show you the recording process of the Space Cafe podcast as I'm recording the intro to the 113th episode of the Space Cafe podcast. And this is what my fancy studio looks like. It's just my living room and nothing else, maybe a fancy microphone and a bunch of notes right in front of me. But that's about it. And this is how I record. Let's go. Hello, everyone. This is the Space Cafe podcast, and I'm Marcus. So you're finally ready for your big voyage to the stars. You're finally ready to leave the planet to a completely different home. You're packing up, you're bringing all your beloved things you wouldn't want to miss. But choose wisely, as access to IKEA will be restricted and refurbishing won't be available for a couple of years, maybe decades. So think carefully about what you want your new home to look like, to feel like, to be like. Consider maybe even details like the kind of hammock, the sleeping bags you'll use, or the beds you'll use, bed sheets maybe, the food you want to eat. How do you envision your life on a different celestial body to be? And this is exactly what today's guest of this show is trying to figure out with her team. Barbara Imhof is one of the world's leading space architects. And together with her team at Liquifer, she's addressing these questions. And since I cannot have the entire Liquifer team here right now with me in the studio, I'd like to make sure that you hear the names of who is involved in this fantastic research. So Liquifer are Renee Václavíček. Please, everyone, please excuse if I'm butchering your last names. Anyways, Renee Václavíček, Waltraud Hoheneder, Monika Brandic-Lipinska, Daniel Schubert, Chris Gilbert, and Ingo Ritat. So, and one more story, my friends. I want to thank space architect Georgi Petrov of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. We had him, I'm sure you remember, a couple of episodes ago, right here on the show. And I met him at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, earlier this year, where we recorded the episode with him. And during the recording, he told me that I may be speaking with the wrong person, because the most preeminent space architect lives just right around my corner in my hometown, Vienna, and is called Barbara Imhof. So I apologize for my ignorance, and I'm making up for it with this episode. Georgi, you still rock the house. Welcome, Barbara Imhof, to the Space Cafe podcast.
Yes, so Liquifer actually just came to me when I was sitting in the airplane reading The Guardian, and there was an article about a new theory of how Mars could have become the planet it is right now. That actually it's called the white planet theory. And so scientists, I think they were Australian scientists, they came up with a hypothesis that Mars, or the volcanoes on Mars and the canyons, they could have built through CO2, white CO2 eruptions, like a magma, but just white and more coldish. And I was quite fascinated by it, that there's another way of sort of forming a landscape, of forming a space, of creating, sort of sculpting a planet. And they were talking about these liquifers, so where the liquifer becomes the carrying canal or system which sort of drives or shapes a landscape. So liquifer is sort of a generic term of aquifer. Aquifer is much more commonly used.
It's like a river.
It's like a river, or like something even human-made that transfers water. and liquefier is more the generic term. And I suggested this to my partners at that time. I don't know. And then we also, I think everybody liked the name, and even other people who were more in the branding and marketing business, they said it's very unique.
It is.
And so therefore we kept it.
So what's to this theory? Is there anything like substantially supporting a theory that on Mars, maybe we're not talking about liquid water, but a different kind of liquid?
No, I think at that time that was really in the, I would say around 2000 or so, maybe early 2000s. We didn't know so much about Mars. So yes, it was a hypothesis. It could have been true, but we found out that it's not true. So we know much more about Mars. We know there are sort of underground water reservoirs. Yeah, there is sort of frozen ice and maybe even carbon dioxide on the poles. But in general, we believe that, or scientists believe, it's a common knowledge that Mars has not been formed by this white planet theory.
But we're still talking about potable water would be the wrong term, but liquid water, like the water we know on Earth, we would expect to have happened on Mars at some point.
Yes, there is another sort of the general common hypothesis 20 years later is that yes, there was water on Mars, there were oceans, but I'm really not a specialist in that, but as far as I know, that due to the very thin atmosphere, it couldn't be contained that easily, so it evaporated over time. So that's why it's this kind of dry red planet as we know now. But sort of the water has kept underground where it can't evaporate, can't escape.
In frozen form, I guess, today. Maybe.
Partially, yes. I really, that is a little bit beyond my architectural background.
Yes, you're the architect here. You're not a Mars expert. So
I know that, for us, space seems always so far away or so distant. And then people think, once you know a little bit about space, you know everything. I know all about it, but they forget that even, there are very different disciplines which are quite distinct. And
absolutely.
Where, you know a lot, but it's more like, I also know a lot about Earth, but of course I'm not a geologist.
But the strange thing is, like in popular culture, at least to me, Mars sounds like already like almost around the corner. Maybe it's in reach. It's so familiar, maybe, because over history, over the centuries, we have been romanticizing with and about Mars. So it's become truly a neighboring planet to us.
It is our neighbor planet. And of course, it is present in pop culture, in science fiction, in Hollywood movies. And it's very similar. It has 25-hour cycle, basically, day and night cycle. So it has some, we believe that we might be able to find traces of ancient life on Mars. So there are some things also that, now it's suggested that there were oceans. So there's the panspermia idea. So maybe life on Earth originated from Mars. So I think there's so many interesting ideas or hypotheses that that maybe that's why Mars is so present in our everyday culture. Although in reality it's 400 million kilometers away, which is a huge distance.
It's huge,
and it's inconceivable in a way.
It is, and this is one of your topics that Liquifer tries to grapple with: how to deal with the vastness of space. As a human being. But let's start at the beginning. So Liquifer is your one-stop shop for everything in human / interplanetary. So you wouldn't transfer humans. So it's not your business to find technologies to transfer humans to different celestial bodies. But once we're there, it's Liquifer's idea and vision to help find solutions as to how to deal with this new environment, how to set up shop, how to build shelter, how to feed ourselves, how to sleep, how to cope with the vastness of space. So would this book be your manual to deal with anything that's out there? For I mean, like Interplanetary Humans 101. Would that be the title? Or the idea?
Well, the title is Living Beyond Earth and in Extreme Environments, or Architecture for Extreme Environments. So, and I think that it's really about, as soon as we leave the atmosphere, which is quite close. So it's at 100 kilometers space starts. And when you as a person would, fly up to 100 kilometers, you would already get the astronaut wings, which is not very far, right? 100 kilometers in the Z axis, and, you're already in space. And so we as architects and designers, we deal with sort of creating environments where humans beyond that, threshold of kilometers need a specific space to live. And we are interested in sort of not only that the humans survive, that would be more an engineering challenge, but that they also can live comfortably, or that they thrive, or they like to be there. They have a good space there, or a good life as possible, as good as possible. And so that starts with transportation, the interior of spaceships. It can be the interior of space stations. It can be sort of thinking further. It can be in bases on the moon or on our neighbor planet Mars, or if we think really very far, it could be also a generation spaceship. So everything from very near future and very realistic to something which is maybe more, can be seen in 50 years, in 100 years, or even further. So this is what we would be interested in. And this is how we look at it. And normally, especially when humans start living beyond the 6 months in space, it becomes sort of your home. So there's it's not a camping trip anymore. It's not a sort of a travel where you just go and travel somewhere and then, you come back after a short while. And then you also have to think differently from an architectural point of view or design point of view.
How do we know that after 6 months, it's your new home? How do we know that?
Well, it is common knowledge, but I think people have found out that there's this margin that, of course, maybe it starts with 4 months or 5 months, but normally, typically, a long duration mission starts with 6 months, and that is considered from a crew and group performance perspective, from sort of individually how we then feel when we know half a year we are away, we can't go out, we can't open the window, we can't, we can't go back that easily, that this makes something with us. Or with our, psychology, and that then we also start behaving differently than if we know, okay, we just go there for 2 weeks and then I'm back. It's like a holiday, or it has a very different kind of duration.
So you're suggesting the perfect holiday should last at least 4 months.
Well, that is another thing, but that is a good approach, I think, to life.
Fantastic. So to start this off, why are we, because there's a bunch of questions at the beginning of the book that are really compelling, and those questions sort of give a framework, a structure throughout the entire publication. And the first question that really drew my attention towards is, why are we so drawn to traveling into space, to getting out there? What do you think is it that makes us yearn for that hostile place? Because in fact, space is a place that wants to kill us all the time. So why do we still want to go there?
I think because it's in humans' nature, the exploration. When we think about how Amundsen and Scott tried to reach the South Pole, how Vasco da Gama or Christopher Columbus, when they tried to reach sort of the Americas, or find new ways to India, when I think even the Romans, you can think of any kind of culture, previous culture, ancient culture. They always tried to explore. They tried to go beyond the known, so stepping into the unknown. And I think that's something which is, why humans are so successful on this planet. They always ventured into the unknown. They always explored. And so we have been exploring a lot of the land on Earth. We are starting now to explore a little bit more the oceans, which is most of the volume or most of the space, but it's equally hard as going into space. And yes, then there's also space. So first, I think it's this. The other thing, it's because we grew up with stories from space, from sort of something which is beyond, with traveling to space. And there are even, I remember once being in Mexico, there are even these very old, sort of in stone carved kind of drawings, which suggest that, there's somebody sitting in a sort of capsule going upwards. And this is, I don't know how many, hundreds, thousands of years old. So I think there's something in that. And the other thing is that, the sky was always around us. It was always there. So space is all around us. There's the sky, there are the stars, and people had different versions of what the stars might be. But, since a couple of 100 years, we know sort of what our setting is. And I think then it's very natural to just, wonder, what if I can go there? What will I see? What will I experience? And so I think these two things that just drive humans to go there and to explore, even if it's an extremely hostile and dangerous place.
Would you personally go?
Yes.
That was pretty quick.
No, I'd go to space station. I'd go to the moon. I wouldn't go to Mars, but I think, the sort of these kind of areas, I would definitely want to explore.
If we now run through the thread that you're proposing in the book, in the Liquifer Living Beyond Earth Architecture for Extreme Environments publication. So whatever spacecraft will bring you to, I don't know, Mars, to the moon and whatnot. So the first thing, of course, is, I guess, that you're proposing to set up shop. We need to build shelter. So how do we do that?
Well, it really depends where I am. So if I'm between celestial bodies, I can use the Lagrange points. I can use points where there's really zero gravity, so where all the gravitational forces from all planet celestial bodies equal zero. And then I could sort of hang my space station there, so I can fix it there. And maybe then...
It's like where the Hubble Space Telescope and James Webb, they're placed at Lagrange points just to be stable. Now, Hubble not, but James Webb, I think.
Even that, I don't know.
Anyways, but so you would be put.
So that could be an option for a larger station. But I can also just, what we do now currently is we circle the orbit. We just go around the Earth, and we find a stable position there through propulsion and a certain speed, and then we can also reach that orbit quite easily. And we can live there, and we can do research, probably in the future manufacturing. It might be, used also for touristic purposes. So there's a lot of things, and it's a very, very different environment. Zero gravity is sort of the opposite of everything we know on Earth. On Earth, everything is bound to gravity. We walk, being drawn to the center of the mass. We, go upstairs and so on. In zero gravity, I can use all the walls, the ceiling, everything equally, and there's no orientation. So it doesn't give us an orientation. I don't need beds, tables. I need other things. It's a completely different life.
I've always wondered why we're still playing with the idea of zero gravity in space, in spaceships, in space stations, because 1969 Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick has already proposed, that proper term keeps escaping me for that wheel. There's a proper term for it anyways. So he has already proposed artificial gravity. More than 50 years later, we're still not there. Where's the problem?
I think I was talking about fixing the station in a Lagrange point. I think in that point, if we are capable to fix a station in that point, which is not that close to Earth anymore, maybe in the Earth-Moon system, then we probably would also be able to create artificial gravity and this kind of turning wheel to have a larger station. But it's doing something in space is very hard. It's just, when we actually look very closely of how long it takes to make a rocket safe and flying, like a new version, it just always takes longer as anticipated.
As expected.
And if we imagine that a lot of these projects are multinational projects, multi-partner projects, then it just even takes longer. And it's not easy. It's hard. So that's why everything takes so long. And then another point is that the space is sort of, if we want to do something in space, we need time. It's very hard, so it takes time. But the money, so most of the space developments currently in the last 15 years has been driven by government funded budgets, taxpayers' money. And so that means that it was very dependent on these 4-year election cycles. So it's not that we can say, okay, let's look into the next 20 years, 30 years, and then we allocate money like each year to give to a space project or space mission. And then we start, but we are certain that we have the next 30 years covered. Then you get quite far in developments and so on. But with these sort of shorter cycles, it's very hard to do anything in space.
Is that getting better now with private organizations, SpaceX? Is that a benefit? Does that solve the problem?
I think with some things it has a benefit. What we are also always looking for disruptive ideas that sort of break out of the usual paradigm, because of course, once an industry has settled, then it's very hard to sort of break that kind of culture, that kind of paradigm, that kind of system, procedures, or whatever they're used to. So it's always good if that gets disrupted, and that has been the case in the last, I would say, 10 years. So that's why some technologies have been accelerated, for example, transportation. But in general, space is very complex because there are also issues of who owns the moon, or who will own a planet, or how do I distribute resources, or how do I manage space traffic in orbit, which is absolutely cluttered right now. And all these mini satellites, they don't, help to sort of...
It's chaos.
Yes,
it's absolutely chaos.
It is. So they don't help to clean it up either. Yeah. So it's, there are a lot of, how can I say, it's this there's no infrastructure, there's nothing there, and we are slowly building it, but we have to build everything from the ground up. So it just, again, it's not an easy endeavor to agree on rules, on, also how do I want to explore space with the people who have the most money or with
the smartest ideas,
or with astronauts who are, who are paid by governments, who do scientific experiments, or with a sort of combination and all these kinds of things. So right now, I think it's sort of, everything is being shaken, and, people try to find a new structure.
Let's now leave the orbital phase and go to the surface of a celestial body. You pick your favorite celestial body.
The moon.
The moon. Good. So you'll land on the moon with whatever vehicle, but then you're setting up shop with your team. This is where Liquifer comes in. What would you do first?
Well, the moon is, first of all, it has no atmosphere. It's very cold and very hot, depending if I'm in a shadow region or if I'm in the sun. If I'm sort of turning towards the sun, then my back is in the shadow. So, one side is very hot, one is very cold. So plus 150 to minus 250 or something. So it's a very harsh environment, and it's very dusty. So the first 10, 20 centimeters are covered with dust. Then the dust has become, through the continuous micrometeorite and meteorite impacts, very, very hard. So it's nearly like rock hard. So the first 20 centimeters, and I'm sure everybody knows these Apollo mission videos where they hop around, and with each hop, they kick up dust. And then the dust gets stuck. It's very abrasive, very thin, and it even gets into your lungs. Though you have this super airtight suit on. So that's something. One, I think, first premise for human exploration on the moon is keep the dust out, stay away from the dust, and try, really to tackle the dust in sort of getting rid of it.
Stay away from the dust that covers the entire celestial body, yes, the entire moon.
So what would I do? I mean, normally I could transfer into another vehicle, because when I land, then a lot of dust gets kicked up. And what I don't want is where my base is to have that kind of dust cloud reach the base. So I will have to create an apron around my landing site where then the dust, is more or less contained. And then I can go to my habitat area. There's enough dust to be kicked up, because I'll probably will drive there. And then sort of I get inside the habitat directly from the vehicle. So there's, that from the inside of the vehicle to the inside of the habitat, I try to have a dust-free zone.
What does the habitat look like? You're proposing different options. You're proposing in situ building, using resources, using that dust to convert it into building material. Or on the other hand, you would bring your own container. So what are the options here? Or even volcanic structures?
Well, what one tries to minimize is transport from Earth, because very costly. And since I have this dust, I have a lot of sun. When I go to specific parts, especially the South Pole of the moon, I can imagine that I take this dust, I concentrate a solar ray on it, and then I can sinter or melt sort of elements which I can then build upon each other. And because the moon has no atmosphere, there's all the radiation coming in. So that's why I need a radiation cover. So I need like 2 to 3 meters thick elements or dust or sand to protect humans from radiation, which is deadly.
3 meters. Wow.
Yes. And then inside that envelope, I can, take from home a very thin other skin, which I can inflate, and that can hold then the pressure, which I also need, because in a vacuum, there's no pressure. So we also need pressure. Sort of with that kind of system where I have sort of maybe a built up through interlocking elements, through kind of Lego bricks or whatever, a shelter against radiation and micrometeorites, Then inside I have this inflatable or inflated pressure shelter. Then inside there, then this would be my base where I can live.
Would that be an automatic fabrication process? So there's no humans needed for that phase. So would you send robots first to build your village?
I think that's an important aspect, because we will not have construction workers there. We will need to develop a whole fleet of robots and rovers and all kinds of machines which can do that for us, which can create a radiation shelter, which then can also build up the base, so that when everything's ready, then humans come in. Maybe humans have to check in between of sort of these short-term missions. But in general, we need to be able to autonomously construct a lunar base.
Is something like this already being looked into on Earth?
No, that is a topic which we are trying to sort of promote actively, because we see more and more nice rendered images and designs of lunar bases, but it's so far away because we have no means of constructing them. So I think the next step is really important, that we speak to roboticists, to AI people, and try to come up with strategies of how to construct a lunar base, maybe a small lunar base, autonomously. And the interesting part is that this could also be used on Earth, applied in terrestrial construction. Because the construction business, is not that, why do humans have to build a house? Why can't it be built, by themselves? So we have that in sort of 3D printed houses. A lot of, building is done by machines, but still I think it has to be even more autonomous on the moon, definitely.
What speaks against now? The third option would be to go into already naturally sheltering places. What speaks against going into lava tubes and setting up your new home inside?
Well, at the moment, we don't know enough about lava tubes. We don't know if they are structurally sound, if we go there, if they don't, collapse. And we haven't, and it could be that they're actually not stable enough. We also have moonquakes. They are not very sort of strong, but they're long, so much longer than here on Earth. And we just don't know enough. We cannot, propose it. So there's a lot of propositions, of course, design studies already made, but we don't know for certain. Also, the next thing is sometimes the size is very large. So,
like what?
Well, there's an 80-meter diameter hole. It goes 80 meters deep, and we have to get there.
18.
Too. 80, like
80.
So we just, it's like, we have to investigate that further. So for now, it's an option, but from a feasibility point of view, I'm not really sure.
What are the current moon village plans and what is out there? What kind of technology are they looking into?
Well, I think the common approach right now is really to for short duration missions, just put a module there and do it.
Bring it from Earth.
Bring it from Earth, sort of Apollo style. For longer, we need radiation shelter, and then just to take the sand and either cover that module, which is maybe a little bit absurd to cover a very expensive, 300, 500 million euro module with sand, but it has to be
healthier.
But it has to be covered for longer durations.
Are those artificial containers, are they radiation safe?
Well, there are possibilities with high density plastic, specific plastic. I think it's called polypropylene, to sort of that it shields a little bit from radiation, but not for long duration. So it might be something for a shorter duration, but not for half a year on the moon.
Good. Now we have our shelter. What does a shelter What does it? What in how far is it different on the inside than the room we're sitting in right now?
I think that since in space every resource counts, space itself becomes habitable space becomes a resource. So and we need to treat every resource very carefully, whether it's air, water, food, any kind of material or available space to live in. It's probably will be. We have to take care that we use it very efficiently. That it's not. I think we will need a lot of stuff up there. Then a lot of stuff will probably be brought, but not so much be taken back. So we will need a lot of storage space. We will need some repair workshops. We need greenhouses and habitation area, and even for sort of a smaller lunar base, but when I want to live there longer and I also want to learn how to live completely autonomously so that we can also go to Mars, because this is the prerequisite for Mars, then it will all be quite densely packed, I assume. It will not be a luxurious hotel suite. It'll be maybe, more caravan living, even if it's indoors.
Do you like caravan lifestyle?
I think for a while it's okay, depending on what else there is to do.
If I remember correct, what's really compelling about your proposal in the book is the multifunctionality of rooms. So you don't have your living room and a separate bedroom and a separate kitchen. It all comes together and transforms itself and sort of transforms itself into whatever it is needed for. So that, can you talk to this a little?
Yes, I think because space is such a resource or will also be a scarcity, it's really about how to use it. So first of all, we think that because also we don't know who's going to live there. We're not planning for a family who we can get to know and then we know their habits. We know just principles about human habits. So then we can, and then we have we don't have so much space. So then we have to allow them also to create their own space, to define it as they go along, as they live, because they will become the experts in lunar living. We just sort of do the first step in anticipating and creating scenarios of how it is to live on the moon. So if the space is multifunctional, if I can transform it easily, then it'll give the crew an option to also adapt the space to the way they live there, or what they will find out through living there, what they will actually need. And that'll also then will give us more clues and hints of how to improve the design. That's sort of in addition to the compactness of living.
I like this idea a lot, and I think on the internet there's a bunch of similar experiments in very expensive places on Earth, especially in the Asian countries, where those self-transforming rooms are already being experimented with. I don't know if this is already going beyond experiments. So do people actually already live in such architecture?
I think you just mentioned it. I mean, when I think about Hong Kong, where square meter prices and rents are, in exorbitant, then, people need to, if they really want to live there, they just need to handle the minimal space. And then what you do, I mean, you have to sleep. There's some minimal functions of space, or a flat or an apartment has to fulfill. You have to sleep. You need some, area for hygiene. You need a kitchen. And then maybe, you also don't always want to, sit and work on your bed or eat, while sitting on your bed. So maybe then you want to, take the bed away, which is also in the Japanese culture. It's quite normal to sort of take away the mattress, if it's based on this tatami, to recreate the space during the day and to do something else.
It's always been kind of awkward. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the importance of sleep, but it's awkward to have a sleeping room in the first place, a room that you're not using in your conscious phase, and that's occupying quite a bit of financial contribution and requirements also. So you have a room that's solely dedicated to sleeping. And I think this is not really, maybe I'm misunderstanding sleep, but this doesn't sound efficient.
Yes, I mean, in general, you could argue that our flats before the pandemic, they were empty, at least 1/3 of the day, right? 8 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, or even longer. So it's a complete, and then there are these, everybody wanted a huge flat, So you just wonder why that. And then, suddenly the offices became more empty because you shared desks or you were starting traveling a lot. And then there was the pandemic, and then suddenly everything was squeezed into the flat. And now, the offices are very much empty because nobody wants to return to the office for, I don't think that's always a good idea, but I'm just saying. So I think that, yes, I think it's really about the use of space, especially when we think about how much space we actually take away from an environment which we really need. We call it nature. And it's sort of being taken away, it gets eaten up by human settlements all over the world. And it's not, it's probably nothing which will, in the long run, will help us
it's not
to
sustainable.
sustain.
But we could even add cars to what you're saying. We invest loads of money in a thing we're essentially not using for 90% of 24 hours.
Yes, and I mean, parking lots on the street. I mean, you really wonder. It's 10 square meters. 10 square meters is quite a considerable, room size. And you could have even your little garden there or something else.
So all this is, in fact, the way we live is, in fact, the exact opposite of a good architect. Am I going too far? What a good architect would envision our society to be like.
Yes, I think one can see it now in the new planning of urban quarters, of new quarters, that there is, there are less cars. There will be less cars in the street. It's very hard to ban the cars because there's so much infrastructure which is just being made for cars. But, trying to get it into the garage, creating incentives of not using it, good public transport, and, more trees, more green, also because cities getting hotter and hotter. And I think there's a tendency which gets a little bit better, but it seems, it just seems always not enough.
It is, but this is what makes us human, always not enough. If someone needed to define our species, maybe that's the one line, always not enough. Do you think that venturing beyond our confines of our planet will make us evolve in a different way? Maybe also evolve in a way that we get beyond that kind of thinking that you just mentioned? Will we become different humans?
Well, I think that's what we all wish, that the more people sort of have the opportunity to go beyond the Earth's atmosphere, that they sort of get a different perspective. With astronauts, we see that there's this so-called overview effect, that when they start seeing Earth from further away, seeing it as a whole, that they, you can't see national borders anymore, and you can't see many things you would always see when you're, on the surface, because you're so much within. But when you're outside, you just see sort of one planet, and that it's quite lonely, around this, in this big universe, in this, against the black. this one Apollo 8 image, which was quite coining and which also influenced a lot of the environmental organizations and the movements towards a more sustainable living.
In Liquifer, in your publication, there is a lot of examples that you're also developing. So, for example, now we have set up shop, we have a shelter, now we know what the room looks like, but you also made up your mind regarding how to feed ourselves, how to sleep. You even designed a sleeping bag. You designed robots, how to get to do research for us. Then you designed a vehicle to get us from A to B. So again, going back to me referring to that book as your manual for extraterrestrial life, what is the one concept that you dealt with that you would say is the most difficult for us, for humans, to grapple with when it comes to becoming an extraterrestrial species?
I think the most difficult is currently life support systems, closing the loop. So creating circular systems where everything we bring into that system, including ourselves, sort of can be sustained within a loop where nothing gets to waste, where everything can be recycled, where we can also feed ourselves and have sufficient food which we can grow ourselves. So I think that is something very difficult but very essential to find out and to develop and to master when we want to go further than the moon.
What is the problem with all this? Because I'm always, when you talk about this, I'm seeing that huge glass flask in front of me with a sealed glass flask with a bunch of plants inside doing their thing and being contained, an environment, a self-containing environment. I don't know, there's a term for it, I think.
A biosphere.
Biosphere, exactly. Biosphere. So those biospheres we can already buy even on delivery services or in gift shops. So this is the problem you're referring to, how to create a biosphere, a sealed biosphere that does not need influx from the outside. So where is the problem with all of this? Where are we lacking ability and ideas?
I think it's the complexities. When you buy in the shop these little biospheres, then you have very few plants. You have plants which sort of like each other in a way. You have no insects. It's a very minimal thing you have there, and so that is sort of the complexity we can master. We can, of course, master a little bit more of complexity. And the Chinese National Space Administration, they have this lunar palace, which is a simulation facility for people of 4. And they are very close to really closing the loop. So they have mastered food for people, insects, in that kind of environment. But we also know from Biosphere 2, the experiment from the 1990s in the United States, in Arizona, which was a hugely complex system with sort of remodeling Earth with an ocean, with a savanna, with a rainforest and some fields to produce food, to grow food, that it's highly complex, and that it's if one component is wrong, the whole thing fails, more or less. It's and it's not easy. We are so, we take everything always for granted. We take for granted that, that Earth is there, that we can breathe. There are trees, there are insects, there's everything. Even if, we are decreasing, all life forms here on Earth, but still we take so many things for granted. But if you want to recreate that, it's very complex, and I think there are also some things we don't really know. So what we can, when we recreate these biosphere, we do it on a very simple level in the end, for spaceships or in a way that we can control it. Even our body, I think we have millions of different bacteria in our biome, and without them, we are dead. So, there's all creatures, it's all alive in a way, and this needs to be controlled, and to be also put together so that they all, take care and like each other, and, no virus is emerging, etc., etc. And I think that has been the difficulty also, because the other thing is that sort of we have the simple life support systems like we have on space station. There are some, it's not completely closed, but we can deal with it. But to really, really close it, it's just very hard. We can reach 80% very easily, or maybe 90%, but the last 10%, that's like the huge challenge.
I mean, like Earth has invested millions of years to balance out our biosphere, all the components. It's a huge, complex system, and we're trying to do it in years or decades. So maybe that's one of the reasons it's so tricky, and maybe we can never get there.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's in addition, time, of course, we try to develop it maybe within 4 years of a, election period or something like that. No, I mean, lots of life support systems get developed further, but it's also something. Again, you have to invest a lot of money continuously, and then it doesn't, get. How can I say? You need long-term plans for it, also of investment.
What's the one human trait that is most required for us to make it sustainably out there?
Cooperation, I would say. I think it's, these huge space projects are always about cooperation. You put people into a confined, isolated environment. They only can survive if they cooperate. They're very dependent on each other. And also, a mission can be completely jeopardized if if something goes really wrong with sort of the human individual.
That nicely speaks also to what we're doing on Earth right now. I mean, like we're pretty rapidly maneuvering ourselves into a period of lots of friction, lots of non-cooperation. So knowing from your scientific perspective that if we want to survive as a species out there in space, cooperation is needed. So we're still in we're going the wrong way right now. We're still in a very primitive social state down here on Earth.
Yes, that's what I always feel when
no one is listening.
No, it's not about no one is listening, but I think that, and we know, when we look at the International Space Station is a huge success in terms of cooperation. So many countries, so many different people, cultures collaborated on this. It took a long time in designing that, in getting it together. We've been running it now for 20 plus years. And, there are peoples from Russia, from the US, from Japan, from Europe, sometimes other spaceflight participants from other countries. They all come together here. And the space station partners, they have succeeded in creating contracts that are for the long term. And that is why this cooperation is quite stable.
What are the current projects that you're working on?
Well, we currently work on the next space station, Gateway, which is about to orbit the moon by the end of this decade already. We will see that there's a European module, the International Habitat module, which is a joint venture between the European Space Agency and the Japanese Space Agency. And it is sort of the prime contractor in Europe who built the module, who takes care of the interior, build implementation of the interior configuration, is Thales Alenia Space. So we work for them. We did a couple of design studies in the beginning. We created a mock-up, a one-to-one mock-up, which is now being used to train or to verify the design. So maybe there will be design amendments, which I believe. And then we will also implement that. So now it's sort of a low fidelity, rather a volumetric representation. And later it'll become a sort of medium fidelity, a more real-like representation of the module. And this will be also used to train the astronauts later for their missions.
What's your realistic vision for the next decades, maybe until 2050? Where will we be in 2050 when it comes to venturing out there into the unknown?
I hope we will have established a base on the moon. I hope it's going to be an international base where, everybody has shares common infrastructure. Maybe they have their own modules, but they also have common infrastructure they share. They use it as a research platform, but they also probably use it for commercial activities. 2050, I guess we would be on our way to Mars, first human mission to Mars.
Elon proposes to be on the way to Mars in 2029.
Well, you can always propose earlier, but we'll see what's going to happen.
Barbara, you already mentioned very vividly that you would be the first to go into space if the call came right now. We have a fun tradition on the show to ask our guests because it's going to be a boring ride wherever you're going. It's very long, and the initial excitement will wear off after a couple of days. So what's the one piece of music that will soothe your mind and give you a meaning to travel on out there? So what's the one piece of music?
I think I would choose Surfing on a Rocket by Air, because I always think about this one movie, which title I now forgot. Anyway.
What's the kind of espresso for the mind you'd like to share?
I think what I still have in my mind, and I have very vivid images, is the literature. I'm reading a lot of science fiction literature, and it's not the last book I read. It has been a while ago, I think last year at least. It's called Hail Mary.
Project Hail Mary?
Project Hail Mary, right.
By Andy Weir.
By Andy Weir, exactly. I read the German version, and then it's called
The Astronaut.
The Astronaut. So, but the English translation is Project Hail Mary. And I'm still quite, I remember so many descriptions and so many scenes, and I don't know why, but maybe it's the encounter with another intelligence, which is sort of not the usual type of intelligence you see in movies or in other science fiction stories. It's really a quite intelligent other living being. It's very different from us, and it's sort of and then the way that the story turns, it always has these like new turns which you don't expect. And I don't want to spoil sort of the end of it, but that kind of one of the last images is very how can I say, it still stays in my mind, and I have it right in front of me when I think about that book. It's about traveling to a distant destination through hibernation, waking up, and then there's a whole crew, but only one person wakes up, and suddenly, looking around and trying to find the actual sort of destination of that mission, which is about saving Earth. But, many years have passed already, of course. But that person encounters this other spaceship, and also suddenly finds out that there's another creature living on it.
And maybe now we should not spoil it too much. Maybe, because you're making me very curious. Andy Weir is the one who also wrote The Martian, right?
Right. He also wrote The Martian, and probably the Project Hail Mary will be in the movie soon. Will be converted into a movie. So you can see it in the cinema. So maybe you just go and read it before it appears in the movies.
Before you come back and spoil the rest of the book. Barbara, thank you so much for taking the time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Isn't it truly fascinating what is going on right now? What we're doing here? What we just discussed with Barbara? I mean, like, we're getting ready to not only leave Earth with rockets. That's one thing. That's a challenge in itself, but people are taking care of that. But I mean, like, that we're now making up our minds as to how we want to live out there. In what form, how we should, I don't know, make those places, how we can make those places comfortable for not only months, years, and decades to come. This is truly fascinating to me. This is a pocket in time that's very, very, very unique. Fantastic. I hope you enjoyed this fascinating episode as I did. To me, it was truly fascinating. I know I'm repeating myself. Barbara's work with Liquifer is truly pioneering and shows us how we might create homes out there. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the Space Cafe podcast with your friends. Your support helps us reach new heights. And of course, we'd love to hear you. Check out our show notes, and there's a link at the very end where you can leave suggestions, questions, or feedback. Stay tuned for more episodes where we explore the cutting edge of space exploration. Until next time, keep dreaming big and stay curious. Thanks for joining us, and goodbye.